It's time for Getting Down to Business with Mark Mondo. This new show discusses trends, technology, and tactics to help the listener learn more about improving sales, saving money, and fulfilling a personal mission through entrepreneurship. Today, we'll interview Renée Michaud, a money and abundance coach from Vancouver, British Columbia, about our relationship with money and how to mend it.
Welcome to Getting Down to Business with Mark Mondo on WVLP 103.1 FM. I'm your host, Mark Mondo. We're on the air in Valparaiso, Indiana, and you can listen to us streaming on the website at wvlp.org or use the TuneIn app on your mobile device and look for WVLP. 103.1 FM WVLP is a local nonprofit radio station based in Valparaiso, Indiana. This show, like many others on WVLP, are made possible by the generosity of donors and underwriters. We accept donations at wvlp.org. Simply click on the support tab and make a one-time donation or sustained pledge to WVLP. All donations are tax deductible. Underwriters are made up of businesses and organizations that support the shows on WVLP. Getting Down to Business with Mark Mondo would like to thank Homes by Hortensia, a Coldwell Banker affiliate in Porter County, Indiana, for their support. Homes by Hortensia has served the region's residential real estate needs in Indiana for over 12 years. Contact Hortensia Moreno at 219-249-5118 or visit homesbyhortensia.com. Homes by Hortensia, habla español.
Welcome to the show. In case you're a new listener, here is my backstory. I've been a consultant for small businesses for the last 25 years, helping small businesses implement customer relationship management software, otherwise known as a CRM system, where I learn their business processes and customize software to help them to gain an advantage in sales, marketing, or customer service. But there is much more to becoming a success in business than just having a good CRM. That's why I bring on guests to tell their stories and share tips on either technology, tactics, or trends they use to become successful. So let's get into it and introduce everyone here today. To one of my sides is the producer. She's the star soprano, and she's my wife. It's Mrs. Cynthia Zimmerman.
Hello, hello.
And to my other side, calling in from Vancouver, is Coach Renée Michaud. Renée has spent thousands of hours coaching, energy healing, and provided in-depth trainings and certifications over the last 10 years, helping other successful coaches, entrepreneurs, and business people to finally put an end to the unwanted cycle of self-sabotage with money that blocks them from having the level of success, freedom, and happiness they desire. After struggling herself for years until she discovered the energetic keys to getting free, and her number one goal now is to help as many success-focused people as possible to go from overworked, undervalued, and undercharging to having a business and life of abundance they truly love. Welcome.
Thank you. So such a pleasure and honor to be here with you, Mark and Cynthia.
Glad you're here. Our friend from up north.
That's right. Our first Canadian.
Oh, sweet.
So welcome. When I started this show, I initially thought we'd discuss more tactical skills you need to succeed. For instance, I created an episode on how to compile free software to help you start a business on a literal shoestring budget. Then if someone listens to my recommendations and builds a business with those tools, could all that cheap software ensure success? Not really. The software may save someone $500 to $1,000 a year, and yes, that matters. However, it really can't solve problems when it comes to mindset, emotional intelligence, and human support systems. So I've concluded technology plays a supporting role rather than a primary one, especially after I went through some of the roughest times in my adult life from 2007 to 2012. Although I was a good tech, it really didn't matter. My tech skills could no longer cover up my mental health deficiencies. And through several years of professional help, I had to rebuild my mental health as well as my relationship with money. And when I met Renée in a professional networking group via the UK, oddly enough, but her specialty is helping people with this complicated relationship with money. And I knew this had to be discussed. So when I met Renee, one statement that resonated with me is fear makes us dumb.
I would have to agree with that. Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
It was one thing I didn't come up with. It made me a lot of things, but I don't know if it made me stupid. So let's dive into discussing how can we change our relationship with money. So Renee, as that phrase sticks to us, why does fear make us dumb?
Yes. So I love that, Mark. I remember saying that to you because we were talking about money and our relationship with money, right? And a lot of times, we'll come at a problem, like you said, with more tactics, more strategies. I got to just think differently. But there's parts to your brain, and we're not taught how this brain works, right? Or how this computer and the software that is us works together, right? And when we're in stress, worry, fear, doubt, inner conflict around money, wanting money, not making enough money, maybe there's, fear there's never going to be enough, etc. We're actually in a survival mode program that kicks in. And survival mode is what? It's fear, it's fight or flight. It's also freeze, flop, fawn. We have different ways of reacting to fear. But in essence, what it does is it closes the brain and it narrows our focus so that we're focused on what? Survival, right? The whole point of fight and flight is to get out of there and survive. And it's not, we lose access to whole brain thinking. And that's what I mean by fear is making us dumb, because it is really, we're no longer have access to our cognitive ability that we would have, otherwise, right? And think about it in this day and age, like we are swimming in fight or flight all the time, most of the time, because of, all of the stresses that we have in this modern day life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, we've got deadlines to meet. If you're an entrepreneur, you've got a lot of stuff going on, right? You got to make sales. You've got to, do your back end. You got to do your finances. You've got to, hopefully be seen and get more clients. Or, even if you're working in a job or in corporate or you have your own business, etc., there's a lot of stress, and it's how we're relating to that puts us in this fight or flight or rest and digest state. But when we are in fear, we are literally less focused. We are less capable of having up-leveled ideas, of having brilliant ideas, of being creative, of actually taking action that would help us move forward. And instead, what will happen is things like coping mechanisms that look like we said, oh, I sabotaged myself, but really they're coping mechanisms to keep us safe from feeling all of that really uncomfortable stuff, right?
I think for me, back in the troubles, we just call them the troubles, it's just troubles, I put a nice word around it.
Yeah.
A flowery word. My coping mechanism was good food.
I was going to say food.
Or a lot of it.
Number one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Emotional. Overeating, emotional eating, checking out with food, drinking.
Mm-hmm.
Here's another one, fighting with your spouse, picking a fight, arguing. It seems like something we wouldn't want to do, but it's a stress relief for a lot of people because it brings them back to the familiar, even if it's uncomfortable. It brings them back to something. Does that resonate?
Before Cynthia, I was in another relationship. Cough, cough.
Yeah.
And there was a fight flight cycle that was really interesting. I probably can't go through all the rest of it on today. We don't have enough time today, but there was definitely a fight, flight, and fear factor. So there was the vicious cycle of stuff. I made a lot of bad adult decisions that's all I can own, with a lot of hindsight and a lot of support 15 years later, 17 years later. But guess what that instrument was? And I want to start correlating it back to money. Money was the instrument that was in trouble. I was able to cover up my problems with money I was making it, and then the recession hit. It hit her. It hit me. And guess what was left on the table? That, what do I call our assessment of money? Good, bad, or neutral? It
Yeah.
went from good to neutral to bad in a seconds. It
Yeah.
felt like seconds.
Yeah. Yeah. You mean what? So when you said what went to neutral?
Oh, money, the assessment of money. It wasn't a means to an end. It was bad. It became
No, exactly. Yeah. So back to that, like that whole fear thing. So money is interesting because money is this, it's this neutral energy. It's an energy, right? It's a currency. And it's had a bad rap over the millennia, like literally thousands of years
Mhm.
of projections thrown onto money about, if you're filthy rich or you're dirty money or, the root of all evil and all of that kind of stuff. And yet it's a survival tool too. We all need it and stuff. And we're not really taught healthy relationship with money. We are downloaded those things about money from our family, from our upbringing, from our culture that we grow up in. Yeah. And, some of the conditioning that we receive around it, whether or not you're allowed to have money, whether or not it's spiritual or virtuous to have money. You don't want to be too greedy. And all of those belief systems get in the way of having what we want. And they are the number one reason that couples break up, actually, Mark, is over money. And our relationship to it can be so dysfunctional that we don't even really realize it because, how the brain works, we have the conscious part of our thinking, the stuff that we with the decision making part of our brain, right, where we set a goal. And the unconscious part, which is 85 to 90% of it, holds all your memories, all your emotions. It's what goes after your goals. It allows you to take the action. It allows you to implement things. If that is not in alignment with your, with your conscious mind, right, then you have this inner conflict going on.
Yep.
And it means that you're going for a goal. You want to build your business. You want to go make sales. You want to go reach more people. You want to, have a better life, a better business, a little more comfort or whatever, be able to give back more, etc. But if you've got your foot on your gas that way, and then you're going to have your foot full on the brake on the other one, if there's a mismatch internally with your belief systems, what you think is true for you, and if there's any negative stuff projected onto money, why would you go after money? Even though you think you want it, if there's a mismatch in there, and that does create stress. So now you're back to the fight or flight, and you're in this feedback loop, and you can't see it because, it's your blind spots because you're in them, right? So you can't see what's going on inside of you because you're really wily. I mean, your brain, for preservation, to keep you safe, is hiding this stuff from you on purpose because it's like, this doesn't feel good. Don't go there. And it keeps you stuck in this cycling of, I don't know what's wrong. I'm going for my goals. And, instead I'm going to eat. Instead I'm shopping and spending money. Or here's another one. If we're not, we're not able to receive the money, that we're bringing in, we will bring in money. Let's say we have an income goal. We will make more money. We will get rid of that money as fast as possible.
Outspend yourself? Do people a chronic spending habit? I'm curious to learn about that. That has not been my
So
personal.
if you're not a vibrational energy match, if you cannot be like, if you're not in alignment with, let's say you wanted to make 6 figures, multiple 6, whatever your goal is financially, but internally you're like, oh, that feels scary. That doesn't feel, I'm not in alignment with that. Or I can't cognitively, think, how would that make me feel? It's why lottery winners most of them lose all the money again. Why? Because they're not a match for the money. So what ends up happening is spending. You'll actually attract, bills. It's weird, but like the car will break, the hot water tank will burst. Like, it sounds crazy, but we are creating and manifesting our results from the inside out. I always say, like, it's an inside out job, right? So with money, we have a mind, body, nervous system connection. And that's first. That came first. That got wired into us really young. When our earliest memories of money and what was happening in the house, even if we're not having a cognitive memory, we will have downloaded, whether or not money is good, or if it makes mom and dad fight too much, or if we were told that it's not virtuous or whatever. And so when we go for a larger money goal, Mark, what ends up happening is, and we're not in alignment with that, it won't feel comfortable, and it will like disappear. So
I think one of the things I learned through my work and during the troubles was, if you don't address the problem, it comes out sideways.
Yep.
Like you're saying, you can either fight with your spouse, not this one, but or the analogy that one of my friends used during the troubles was, let's say you're in a swimming pool and you get those cool beach balls.
Yeah.
You fill it up with air and you try to push it down.
Yeah.
But always
it bounces up.
Finds a way to squeeze it and come back up.
Yeah.
And I think what notes I had here, besides growing up, what other influences, what do you think peer groups have an effect on when it comes to money?
Oh, a big influence. So who you surround yourself with has a huge influence on your thinking. Like, we are programmable beings, right? Like, we get programmed from the get-go. Like, we're being told and we're being programmed how to think and all that sort of stuff. So peer groups definitely, like, what they value and whether or not they will be supportive of your goals. Interestingly, that sometimes you think it would be your family or these certain friends, and sometimes they're not. They act like saboteurs. It's interesting. So it happens in weight too. I've worked a lot in the health field, and if you have a health goal, a weight goal, sometimes you'll find that the very people you thought were going to be supporters of you are the ones who are trying to feed you cake, right? So so peer groups are important. Who you surround yourself with, what you're feeding to your brain, like what you're saying. So whatever you're, consciously feeding to your brain, right, says, this is what I want to focus on. Your brain says, okay. So it focuses on that. So if it's a limiting thought, like, this is going to be really hard, or it's impossible for me, or there's never enough, or look at those people, they got all the money and I feel whatever it is, jealous, resentful, any of that sort of stuff that we're throwing out.
Yeah, I remember one story where, and let's see how that works, and maybe to the audience. I mean, I'll share some vulnerabilities here. I remember during my first relationship, went to a friend's house. I won't say whom, but boy, I remember I was struggling trying to get our first foot in the door on real estate. And I went to this friend's house, and wow, were they ahead of me in that, keeping up with the Joneses. I was nowhere near it. And I just remember just having that internal collapse internally. And I'm like, I'm out. Yeah.
And if you had, now today, if you go back and examine, like, what was Mark thinking, do you think, at that time? And when we compare ourselves and we're thinking, well, they got it better, therefore I'm less than, or whatever was going on.
Compare and despair was the catchphrase to, it was compare and despair.
And so that's like, it is a dream killer, right? When we start doing stuff like that. And this is leaving, like, when we don't uncover and clear up anything that is actually running in the background, like a software program. Like, if you talk, software, right? Like, if you got a bunch of stuff running in the background, it's draining all your power and your ability and your memory and everything. It's similar like that inside of us. Like, if we've got these belief systems going on that are hidden in there, that are running, they end up costing us huge money. And also because we're not actually going for the business that, that we might like for ourselves. They cause us to reduce our goals. Really interesting one is like, oh, I don't really want that. Maybe I'll have this, because it's a little more comfortable. And so we end up leaving a lot of money on the table. Not only that, it costs us a lot of happiness, a lot of joy. Like you said, you walked away feeling like despair about it, right? And then
it was.
You can get into a cycle like that where you never really allow yourself to succeed. So what I was saying about like that being in alignment with the amount of money, that you want, sometimes it takes working up there. And believe me, even if you've got millions of dollars, if you are trying to go for the next level, you come up against your own glass ceilings. What are those? What are those limiters, right? And so it's really worthwhile to look at, okay, what does that mean? What am I been thinking? How to clear that out so that you can let yourself receive your dreams, go for your goals, create what you want to create without having to be overworked, overstressed, right? Feeling like you need to give and give all the time because you got to earn what you're doing. Because I think a lot of the programming that I deal with too around people's like, well, what does that bring up? It just feels like it's going to be heavy. I'm going to have to really work really hard all the time. It doesn't feel sustainable, etc. Right?
Sure.
And as most of us grew up with that kind of paradigm, that you had to work super hard, money didn't come easy, and all of those belief systems that just sound like, well, yeah, that's the way it is. Well, that's the way it is because that's the way we create it, right? So it's interesting because
How long do you see that when we were talking about either the lottery, your mindset, the money with the lottery of birth, let's call it. How many generations do you think there's been an influence against a family? One generation, two or three or more?
no, it's multiple.
Yeah.
It's multiple. And and it doesn't necessarily mean it's active in you, but it will be in you. Like even if your parents didn't say that stuff,
Right.
even if they were holding on to that, like for example, our forefathers went through wars, right?
Yep.
They went through starvation, right? There were times when there really was contracted amounts of stuff, like really wasn't a lot. And so that gets handed down. And, that maybe there's not going to be enough, the survival, the lack. And, it's our brain has a bias to look at negativity because that's kind of part of the survival mechanisms to look out for like what's not going right.
There's a
So
saber-toothed tiger around the corner.
yeah, exactly.
Still?
Like what is coming around the corner. And so they're held in the subconscious mind and in our personal nervous system, and so that does go back quite far. But that doesn't mean that it takes forever to clear out. But it's just like a lot of the baggage that we come in with. You as a baby didn't come in with these thinking thoughts, but you did come in with survival genes, that are in you, right? But then you get taught things, right? So the things that we get taught, where does that come from? That comes from knowledge that was a lot of the times handed down, sometimes upgraded. When I deal with women, we've had generations of stuff like you weren't allowed to work, you weren't allowed to make your own money, right? You weren't allowed to really want stuff because that was greedy, because you're a nurturer and things like that. And then guys have their stuff that gets like they got to be the provider, and there's a lot of heavy stuff projected onto money, and it can feel really really heavy for people, right? There's a lot depending on that, to make money or and then what does that mean about you? And all this stuff is happening in split seconds in your mind. There's decisions being made that are based on really outdated software that we received in our, formative years from 0 to 7, even, and so here we are in 2024, and we're trying to use software that was from 40, 50, 30 years ago, however many years ago. And it's just not going to run properly if you think about it from a technology perspective. I like to put it into real like analogies for people because they're like, what are you talking? It sounds very, esoteric, but it's not. It's how we work, that we do have, we are emotional beings, not that our emotions are running crazy. We have to be emotionally intelligent, how to use, we have to learn how to use this software, how to use this hardware, right? That is us.
Yeah, I remember one anecdote on that, on the habits laying around. And my grandmother and my dad's mom grew up in the Depression. I mean, I didn't know it as a kid, but I learned more much later, and she's passed she's been gone for about 30 years, but I do remember like those bad leftover habits that when we were in the fridge, everything was left over, and there was always a lot of cups with a lot of leftovers in it.
Yep.
Because I learned a little bit when I was a kid, but I think knowing now, my parents did very well. We never missed a meal.
Yeah.
But I know she had everything saved to the last shred of butter.
Yeah. We even saved those little clips on the bread bags. Those little
Yes.
plastic clips. I don't know why, but we had a bag full of them because that's what they did in the 40s or whatever during the war. They saved every piece of tin foil, every little, right? And so those things get like, you can't waste. Yes, it's good not to waste, of course, but it does show up and create emotional blocks with money. It's weird because money, like earlier, is like it's the tangible physical form of value, and abundance in this world, right? We can talk about abundance of health and wealth and emotional well-being, right? And it's sort of an umbrella term, but money is very real. Money is very real, right? Because it's the thing we all know and the thing that we place value on. And I really like to uncover and clear up anything that gets in the way of having a really up-leveled experience and relationship with money, so that money becomes, instead of like this thing that you chase or this necessary evil, which is a bad projection onto money, but like I need that, it's so hard to get, or like wanting a ton of money and just holding on to that money just for yourself, like all of that, sort of heavy baggage that's around it. But what if we started to get into relationship with money as like welcoming money, thanking money for showing up, being grateful for the money that you have now on the way to making more money, circulating money, because every time you spend money, you literally help other people. So it has a positive effect too, right? Not just this negative that we are, I remember the negativity bias, right? Like we always remember the negative stuff. Even something negative somebody said to us, we will remember that over 10 times nice things people said to us, oddly enough.
Agreed. So we're going to take a station break.
Sure.
We talked all these problems, but guess what? After the break, Renee's going to help us take the negative and start creating a construct to make it more positive and start building our relationship to a positive manner towards the neutral instrument of money.
Before we get into the next segment, we wanted to let you know you're listening to Getting Down to Business with Mark Mondo on WVLP 103.1 FM, a community radio station out of Valparaiso, Indiana. Thanks for listening, and let's continue.
And we're back from break. Cynthia said, I have to keep this story short and sweet. I worked in a boiler room. I lasted 6 weeks. The one thing I learned from that guy, money is a wonderful servant, but an awful master.
Yeah.
So that's how they motivated us. I think it's a bit extreme, but it was valid. So let's find some balance with Renee, and we're going to solve all the world's problems here in the next 25 minutes. So, Renee, how are we going to get out of this negative state with money and work our way up to something either towards neutral or a positive attitude towards the instrument of money?
Yeah. So great question, Mark. So first thing that, to start with is just to uncover what is the current relationship with money, right? And not just money, but the different kinds of money that we have. And I don't mean like the currency. I mean so we've got our income, right? The money that we're making, the inflow of money.
Mm-hmm.
And we will have an automatic thought, a feeling about that, and any memories connected to that, right? That will automatically show up. So it's a good, well, anyways, I'll start with that one, the income flow, the money that's coming in, and then our savings. That's another kind of money. Like, what is our relationship to that? Like, does it make us feel stressed or fearful, or are we feeling expansive around our savings, right? So it's good practice to write those numbers down and then have a look at what do you notice about that and what comes up automatically? So income and savings. And then here's an interesting one, debt. So the amount of debt that we feel comfortable with and that actually we need to have in order to feel comfortable. Sounds bizarre, but that is kind of how. Yeah. So again, back to that mind, body, nervous system connection. The mind body, what do I mean by that? Means that you have a thought and a feeling, right? That are like, if you look at something and you think, oh, it's not enough. And now you have this feeling of like, oh, sadness maybe, or despair that comes up. What was the question? I just completely.
So explain what, I think you found something, because it's probably different from my mindset, and Cynthia, you may chime in with your
debt load. So if we're looking at
debt,
yeah. So if we're looking at debt, we're like, debt is interesting. Sometimes we'll have debt, we'll pay it off, and then we'll create debt again, like uncomfortable debt, not like investment where you've invested in yourself and that, that money's coming back and stuff like that. And sometimes there's a need to have that because that is the familiar, uncomfortable state that makes us feel like we're okay, even though it's painful.
So does that explain somebody going on a shopping spree? They just go put a vacation on a credit card, then they have that negative motivator to pay it off?
Not a negative motivator to pay it off, a need to have the debt. And it's an unconscious thing because if they have a certain amount of debt, it fulfills a belief that they have in themselves. It's really deep stuff, but it comes up. It's like, why can I never get out of debt? Or when I do cut out of debt, I just create more debt. Like suddenly they're off spending, like you say, going on something that is just consumer debt, not investing in yourself or whatever, but more like spending debt. So that's why I said debt's an interesting one, and it might be linked to memories or little traumas and things like that around financial stuff. Also, our goals around money. How do we feel about that, right? So again, first step is to really bring ourselves into awareness about what is actually going on with my relationship with money. And if there's any toxic money going on in our life, like money that's owed to us, or alimonies, or things that keep us kind of in a state of embattlement, right? In a state of energetic push-pull, energetic. You need the money, or you're owed the money, but you kind of resent the whole situation. Divorces are big for that kind of thing. Settlements, stuff like that. And then once you get that, look at that, you just notice what goes on inside of your mind and then in your body. So step number one to making any kind of transformational change is really bringing the unconscious into the conscious, to bring what's been in the shadows out into the light, right? Out into the light. And the number one key that I always ask people when we're doing this kind of work is to say that you have to do this from a completely non-judgmental place for yourself, because you're not about to go, you idiot, you created that debt, and now looking back with regret and all that kind of stuff. Because what does that do? That just recreates more inner stress and resistance to having the very thing and doing the very things that you want to do in your life, right? So it doesn't serve.
I'm coming for help. Why you on my case? And I'm trying to get help from you. Yeah, right. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Admitted vulnerability.
Yeah, you don't want to be your own worst critic. What you want to come from is a place of compassion for yourself, because you've been doing exactly like you've been programmed so far. So if you think like that, I've been just, behaving right in accordance with my programming, but now the results that I'm getting are maybe not in alignment with my new goals. Therefore, now I'm due for an update in my software. I'm due for an upgrade. I have been working with outdated software. It's time to upgrade how I think, feel, and and how I'm wired right down to the nervous system level.
Yeah, one analogy that may help the audience, or at least it helped me during some tough times, was the skills that we use to survive, let's call it little t or big T trauma in childhood or wherever else, are no longer working. If it's the same skill, it may have worked back then, but it's not working now.
Yeah.
If
It's
you can analyze that and find a safe space to start resolving that, I think you're going to be in a better place.
Yeah, absolutely. And also realizing that you are having the desire for something more because it is ready to come up and be cleared. Like I always say, this is a good news story, like that you get to look at this stuff because really like it's time, your inner, higher self person wants more, right? And holding ourselves back, sometimes we can go for decades doing it because we don't have the skill sets and stuff like that. But like to your point, Mark, was excellent point, is like we can't solve the problem with the same thinking that got us into the problem. So, we got to come out. It's really just updating that way of thinking. So first step, getting awareness, looking at it from a place of non-judgment and saying, okay, what is my automatic programming around this stuff, right? And that's a start. It's always working with someone else to help you bring out what is unconscious because, we get very crafty. Everybody needs someone to help them, guide them to do this stuff, but you can do a fair amount on your own of bringing this stuff into light. And it does take a willingness to look, that's all. Because sometimes you're just like, I'm not going to bother with that, so I'm going to push it away. Believe me, you push it away, it stays in the dark and it is still acting out, keeping you stuck in this cycle of unnecessary struggle, oftentimes unnecessarily recreating the same old patterns. And if you're tired of the results, remember the results are an inside out job. We are creating based on, in accordance with our belief system, right? And the energy, the nervous system that how it's wired into us. So that's step number one, I would say. And another really great exercise is to just examine. I'd shared this in a group the other day. A lot of people had a lot of ahas when they went, came back the next day and was like, wow, it's just examining, money. You talked about that, money makes a terrible master, but a great slave. Something like
Yes.
that. I always say money makes a great ally. Like, what if money actually was in partnership with you and wanted to show up? So how, if you were in relationship with money as, a friend, as a resource, an energy resource, like air, like water, right? Like food and anything that is sustaining, right? Because money is that sort of that currency that we all use, that's sort of neutral, right? That we trade things for. Well, what if money wanted to show up and be, help you in your life, fulfill whatever it is that you're going for, fulfill your purpose, your drive, your goals, have a happier life, have more fulfilling, business experience, serve more people, be able to give back more, etc.
What is the sorcery you speak of?
I know. So you can start to say, journal a little bit, like, what would money say about me as a friend? So here's some insights, as often, I remember feeling like I resented money. Like I seriously resented it because growing up, there was always this like, money doesn't grow on trees and no, you can't have that. We don't have the money and no, no, no. And I always thought, well, I hate money. Money's no fun. Money always has the control in our life and it always says no, And so why would I didn't even want to look at money. I didn't like money, but yet I wanted to make money because I wanted to have the things that money allowed me to do, right? I really wanted that. So I had a really big inner conflict going on. I really wanted these things. And yet this part of me was saying, why would I want that thing? It's so like, it's horrible. It has the control and it says no, and it's mean and, and everything. So I had to really clean up my relationship to that resource called money. So a journaling exercise around what would money say? And sometimes people feel like, wow, they're in hot, cold relationship with money. It's like, I want it, but then I reject it when it shows up. Or, it can be very, very insightful if you start to examine it as if it were a friend, How welcoming are you to money? How grateful are you to the money that you do have? And when you look at money, like, for example, if you said, hey, the dollars I have, every dollar is like a little thank you note. And I'm circling thank you notes everywhere. And I'm receiving thank you notes from other people and putting a more, uplifting positive intention on money, because originally when money was created, it was from a place of positive intention. It had a very positive intention in the world, and that was to help us. So if I was, that person who had a skill set, like, I was a farmer and I had eggs and you were a tailor or something, you would have to make me something and I would have to get we would have to trade our skill sets.
A little easier to carry dollar bills versus chickens.
Exactly. And we give it value. And we often will go like, well, if I have this much, therefore I am that much. But that is incongruent. That is not true, right? It is not self-value. It's just the value of the trading resource you have.
Can you talk about that a little bit? I think it's in either American or Canadian culture, especially. I don't know if it's especially versus East versus West, because I didn't really live in the East like Cynthia has. But the value of money as it correlates to self-esteem. What have you seen in that?
I think it's a Western world for sure. It's a Western world thing for sure, because, well, if you think back, we talked about generations back, go back to kings and queens and all that kind of stuff, right? You had nothing, you were nothing. You were a nothing. You were a serf, a slave, a whatever, right? And so it has gotten filed into the wrong brain file that having money, right, means something about you as a person. And money, as we talked about, is a resource. It's an energy, and it's people who use it. So when they say money, is, for example, let me just digress here for a second, but money's the root of all evil, or money does bad in the world, or things like that. It's not. It's people using money that do that. It isn't money doing it. You don't see money going out there and doing that stuff. It's actually people doing it, right?
Yeah, I noticed, obviously the negative news starts, but I went down a rabbit hole called Reddit, and I don't know if the story is true, but it highlighted the story of a billionaire that it was an Ireland guy that gave away 99.97% of his wealth before he died.
Yeah.
Why didn't that make the news?
Yeah, well, because that's not sensational. And it doesn't sell, because that's just highlighting, the fact that, negative news, even during, this last, this pandemic we all went through, right? It's just like people were traumatized by the fact that everything was so negative from all around the world, so it was terrible. So, but back to the subject of money and self-worth, is that we tend to think like what we do and what we have is who we are. And we've got that stuff enmeshed. And we really have to unhook that and saying, I actually am of value because of the human being that I am, right? And who I am as a person, who I am. And so when we want to have more money, it's how are we being, in order to be in alignment with that more money, right? It's not that we're a better person, therefore we get more money. No, it's just that we're more open to receiving our dreams and our goals. And because we are of value, the goals have to be right, worthy of us, not us worthy of our goals. The goals have to be worthy of us, but we're not taught, for the most part, to value ourselves, because the messages that we get very young, early on, is like, who do you think you are? Shame on you. And we download all of these negative, belief systems. And I remember being told shame on you, and I felt terrible as a kid. And I thought I must be shameful.
Yeah, I learned helplessness in social psychology in undergrad, and it was one of the hardest classes I took, but it seems like I'll say most relevant, but really stretched into a long-term, I'll say life lesson, but that intellectual capital that I got at the Jesuit University. So yeah, it's an inside joke there. But
we'll say an inside joke on
yes,
so we don't bore our audience.
Yeah.
That's right. Maybe I'll cut that out in post. So
but can I just interject? So the way I'm understanding what you're saying is that obviously we don't value ourselves based on how much money we have, but we retrain our minds that money is just a tool for which we use to accomplish certain goals. And that if we don't see it as the master, if we don't see it in a negative light, then it has less control over our decision making. And we just see it as a tool in which to accomplish certain avenues in our life. Would you say that's a accurate statement, or?
It's accurate, and I like to up-level that as to not just a tool that we kind of use, but that we partner with.
Okay.
And why? Because we want to be welcoming to money and not just say, well, I get what you're saying, and that is true. That is true. However, we want to welcome money because money as an energy, it's like it does respond to what we're putting out. So if we said, well, you're just this tool, I don't really care about you, it's like, okay, I don't care about you. It doesn't say that, but it's kind of this way of energetically pushing it away. So if you just said, I'm in partnership with it, this is my goal, and I welcome money in, like Mother Teresa did when she did great big projects around the world. They needed millions of dollars. Well, where did all that money come from? She just said, wherever it was, she welcomed it in, and suddenly people are donating and all this money shows up, So it's an up-leveled paradigm, Cynthia, that allows us to say, well, money is actually, I welcome money. I always keep cash money in my wallet to just remind myself and symbolize, like, I'm welcoming money into my life because money is going to partner with me to allow me to do the things that I want to do in life, to serve the way that I want to serve, and to have the level of joy and peace that I want to have. Because why? We don't want to be in fight or flight. And we don't have that brain that says, like, I can't think, and I can't focus, and I can't do, and I just want to run away and go eat ice cream. And, or spend money, or, shop online, or just check out scrolling. People talk about doom scrolling, or, Netflix or whatever. It's just ways that when it becomes a chronic, way to check out and not show up for ourselves and our dreams, it can get really easy. And so it does put a wet blanket on our dreams, right? When it feels like it's always at arm's length. So if you can go to first level, it's a tool, it's a slave, I get to use it. Next level, what if money was showing up for me? Money wanted to come into my life, and I'm being a good friend and welcomer for money. My bank account always has room for more money, always has room for more, right? So that you get to have just the level of, and you get to say what that is. Nobody gets to say, like, I'm running around going, like, money, money, money is all I think about. But it really serves us to get into this relationship, this repaired relationship with money, so that then what you get to focus on is your dreams and your goals and the things that you want to do, because it is just flowing into. It's a funny thing, money, when it starts to show up and stuff like that, you're like, am I ready for this level, of more abundance coming in, and more ease and more ways to serve, and so I like to look at it like that. And then that way, there's more people doing what they came here to do, and serve in the way that they came to serve, and share whatever gifts that they came to share. Happier people makes for a happier world, right? So, it does have a positive intent and a spiritual intent, in the sense that you get to, actually do the things that you are meant to be doing here, like that you're called to be doing here, right? In this lifetime that you're living. So if you're constantly in lack, I can guarantee you it will be showing up in the other areas of life too. So, and it's really costing all of that joy and happiness and sense of freedom and things like that, to the degree that we're like pinching ourselves off from whatever it is that we really would love to have for ourselves, right? And again, this is coming from, not from self-centered selfishness, but more like self-loving enough that I deserve, that I value myself, that I am of value because I am, and nothing more. And not because of what I've done, not because I've proved it to anything like that, but because that's who I am, and this is how I want to show up in the world. And money is a modern day resource that, let's face it, we all need. We all need it to pay bills, to have roofs over our heads, to have healthcare and all of the basics, hopefully, right, that are covered. And then we get to do those higher things that we want to do. That's what I'm talking about.
That's very helpful, because I think for me, growing up, we also were in a very tight budget household, and it wasn't that we didn't have a good relationship with money. It was more like respect it and don't squander it. Always planned everything out of how you're going to use it.
Yeah.
So for me to do something I would consider frivolous, like buying myself a packet of cookies as a child with my allowance, I would actually hide that in my closet and eat the cookies, because there was a sense of shame that I wasn't using it for something better than just the enjoyment of eating cookies. And I think that's carried through my whole life, is that when I have a little extra money, I like to get something from a bakery or something that I consider frivolous, not necessary to survive, as a way of rewarding myself. Or I don't spend it at all. I just kind of hoard it, and I don't spend it, because then I'm like, oh, I can think of all these different ways I can use it, but I never really follow through. So this has been very helpful for me.
Yeah. And if you think about that, Cynthia, it's an awesome example. Is like that spending is now coupled with and filed in your brain with shame and guilt.
Mm-hmm.
So now every time you're going to spend, you're like, now you're going to have to be awash with shame and guilt. It will come up unconsciously, because it's linked in the memory bank in your filed in your cognitive, in your brain, right, in your subconscious. Right. So and it will keep, you'll want the thing, you'll have to hide it. That's very common, right? And so those cycles of even like not spending is another one, because for example, in a recession, everybody goes, ooh, don't squander. So then what happens? Everybody contracts their money flow. And does that help the economy? No, it hurts the economy.
Yeah.
It stops the flow of money, right? So we go into fear, and we contract, and we actually escalate the problem. So it's so fascinating. And the good news story that I just want to say, because we were talking about good news, is that this stuff is changeable. It's just an update. And it's not like, even though it might have taken you decades to go, oh my God, I've been doing this for decades, this is changeable. And it doesn't take the years that it took to get the problem, right? And so we can release it and install new ways of thinking, new decision making, new ways of operating that just become autopilot, that are actually in alignment with your goals, actually in alignment with what you want. And so that things just feel more like in the flow and joyful.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. So we're reaching the end of our hour. I'd like to thank Renee and my husband, of course, for today's wonderful session on our relationship with money. So thank you, Renee.
Thank you. It's been a real honor and just a great conversation. And thanks so much for having me today.
Absolutely. If you missed some of the show today, you can listen to the replay on Thursday at 1 p.m. Central Time on WVLP 103.1 FM, or live stream at www.wvlp.org. And we store the past shows on Mark's website at www.mondocrm.com/podcast, or you can listen to the podcast on your favorite app at any time. We're listed in the major podcast applications. Just search for Mark Mondo and the show will come up, and you can subscribe to the show for the latest updates. And the show is also on YouTube. Just search for Mondo CRM or Getting Down to Business with Mark Mondo, and the episodes will come up on the YouTube feed. Thank you very much for spending time with us today, and we look forward to you joining us again next week.